What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Dan. I'm into hiking and backpacking and gear. If you guys are into that stuff, do go ahead and subscribe to the channel. You know, they say that lettering on like shirts and hats is really distracting, and now that I've pointed it out, it's probably twice as distracting. But is it distracting, or maybe there's an ulterior motive to wearing this? Check this out. Look at the mountain. Two different companies, exact same mountain. Isn't that wild? I think they probably used the same clip art. Do you guys remember clip art? Okay, one of the most common questions that I get is where to buy gear, what gear I should buy, how I should buy it. Just, Dan, tell me what to buy, tell me what to do. That's an impossible question for me to answer, because what works for me isn't going to work for you. But what I decided to do is really just give you sort of my framework, and it's really just 3 questions I ask myself on every single piece of gear I own, especially in the past probably 2 to 3 years. And this helps me to know exactly if this piece of gear is going to be perfect and right for the individual trips that I take. But before we get into that, I want to mention that this video is sponsored by Art of the Trek. Art of the Trek, thank you guys so much for sponsoring today's video. Okay, if you don't know who Art of the Trek is, if you've been living under a rock, not only do they help plan treks and trips, but they also help organize you with other people to go on trips. Art of the Trek is developing a database right now of hikers, their interests, their common locations, and a lot of commonalities to help pair you up with other hikers in your area. So if you want to find out more, and if you want to join other hikers in your area, head over to buddies.artofthetrek.com, and it's going to help you decide what your best fitness level is, how fast you actually hike, weather preferences, and a whole bunch more to make sure that you're matched up with the right people. So when I'm looking for gear, I'm always asking the big question, is it a quality piece of gear? Is the company reputable? Are they good at customer service? Do I know people that have purchased from them before? And what are their experiences? If you can answer some of those questions and you've got a good idea of the company, if it's a company that's got a big name out there and not a bad reputation whatsoever, those are the companies that I'm gonna buy from before I buy from anybody else. Most of the time, my research works out in my favor, where the equipment ends up being a pretty quality piece of gear. Every once in a while, you're gonna find that piece of gear that you thought was gonna be a piece of quality gear, and it's coming from a good company, but maybe it's a new piece of gear. For instance, this is the Sawyer Micro. It's a water filter that, in my opinion, is an epic fail, but it's from a quality company. So I'm still gonna use this company, I just won't use this water filter. So the gear has to have some form of a reputation of quality. Another question I literally ask on every single purchase is this gear lightweight? So the word ultralight is a term that's thrown around pretty freely. There's really no definition to ultralight. Ultralight is just commonly considered a base weight. In other words, your backpack and everything inside of it that is 10 pounds or less, except your food, your water, and your fuel. You know, the consumable type stuff that you're gonna use up along the trip. And it's not like there's some committee of backpackers out there or some board of backpackers that decided that that's what it is. So like, for instance, if you're a backpacker and your base weight was, say, 30 pounds and you dialed it down this year to 20 pounds by getting new gear or getting rid of gear or whatever, that's ultralight for you. So maybe you're an ultralight hiker, right? So lightweight is really a relative term. So this is a very lightweight tent in comparison to the other tents that are out there. This is probably, from what I can find, the most lightweight 2-person tent in the world. This is the Big Agnes Scout 2 Carbon. I can never remember the name of this tent. It weighs 15.7 ounces on my scale. The manufacturer's website says that it weighs 16 ounces, and that's with everything, the stuff sack, the stakes, everything. It's a trekking pole tent, but this tent is not for every situation or circumstance, and I will get to that in a minute. This, however, is also a very lightweight tent, also a 2-person tent. This one weighs about 2 pounds, 4 ounces, everything included. But it's only going to serve a certain purpose for certain situations. So for some people, this is the most ultralight tent they'll ever get. For some people, this is the most ultralight tent they'll ever get. And each of these is great, but they're gonna function differently, which brings me to the third question I always ask myself: is it going to function for my trip? This particular trip I used on my last backpacking trip I took about a week and a half ago. I did 34 miles in 48 hours, which was huge for me. And I really challenged myself to go ultralight. And in my gear loadout video ahead of that trip, which I will post right up here if you guys want to check that out, I asked you guys, should I go ultralight or not? You know, should I bring my heavy camera gear or should I film with my iPhone? And you guys overwhelmingly told me to film with my iPhone, so that's exactly what I did. And I was able to experience for the first time in literally years going super ultralight. And for me, that was a 9-pound base weight, because I also brought a chair that was 1 pound. Honestly, I loved it. It was obviously more comfortable for me. I didn't have to carry my heavy camera gear. It was 87 degrees during the day and it got down to 46 degrees overnight. And the terrain out there is very, very rocky soil and very hilly soil. I also got a big blister on my foot, which made the trip absolutely miserable. So if it had not been for you guys pushing me to just use my iPhone, I think I would have had a lot more difficult time on that trip carrying heavier weight. So in that instance, this tent functioned perfectly for me. However, I am heading on another backpacking trip tomorrow and I'm going with my daughter who's 11 years old. This tent is not gonna do well on that trip. This is a 0.34 Dyneema on the walls of this tent. It doesn't have a vestibule and it hardly fits 2 people comfortably in here. So I don't want my daughter going in and out of this tent at 11 years old, accidentally ripping the Dyneema, and I don't want us to be uncomfortable inside the tent with it really small on the interior. So for that situation, as much as I want to take a 2-person tent like this, and years ago I probably would have forced us to because I was more concerned about weight than I was anything else, this tent isn't going to function well for us. So I'll be taking the Marmot with me. It's a lot bigger on the inside, headroom is a lot bigger. The square footage on the floor is much bigger, so I can put 2 pads comfortably on the inside. It's made out of a nylon that's at least thicker than this Dyneema, so I'm not gonna have to worry about ripping this when my daughter goes in and out of it and that kind of thing. And what's also important is that this tent is very thin. It's so thin that you can actually see through it. And that freaks kids out. At least it does my daughter at night when she thinks that she can see, you know, animals and creepy crawlies outside the tent at night. So this, in my situation, is it gonna function well for my trip? Absolutely. So to sum it all up, I'll use this as a final example. Quality company, lightweight, and it functions for my trip. If you can answer those 3 questions every time you purchase gear, you're probably purchasing the right gear. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Dan, why haven't you talked about money? Well, I think that's pretty obvious. I think money is also a relative term. A reasonable price is gonna be up to you guys. So take that into consideration for what it's worth. All right, guys, hope that helps you out in your quest to purchase new gear. If you guys like this video, make sure you hit that like button. Also subscribe for more. Hit that bell notification so I can send you a video every time it's released. And I will see you on the next one.